out of your for taking time out of your program, your day to attend this presentation. So I'm going to just give you, first of all, just a breakdown of what we're doing tonight, and then we'll proceed. So bonsoir, bienvenue, welcome, and thank you both to Suzanne and Nadia for having us get engaged in this. First of all, I'm going to talk about, I'll present an overview, a pragmatic view of the issue of cyberbullying, because people hear a lot about it. And if you're not familiar with what's happening with young people, it's important to know what exactly cyberbullying entails, what is involved, and how we address it. We're going to focus on sexualized cyberbullying among teens, because that has become a really big focus and it's very problematic among young people. We will then show you a video, and I would caution that there are some words in that video that are offensive, but this is how it happens among kids, to show you the impact of what can happen to an innocent young girl when when a film that she sent to a friend is distributed without consent, and then she ends up being cyberbullied. We will talk about why teens as young as in grade 7 engage in sexting and cyberbullying, send each other pictures, and then that ends up on the internet, and they are cyberbullied and stalked and teased for most of their time, both on and off line. Then Sarah Zaim, my student, will provide some statistics to give you a sense of how prevalent this is. And then we'll talk about the impact and school responsibilities. And then I will talk about how it's everyone's responsibility. What can we do? And if there are parents here, I think they will be wanting to hear a little bit about some of our suggestions and recommendations. And then I will talk a little bit about our projects right now at McGill, where we are promoting prevention and how we're approaching it. And that can be applied to cyberbullying as well. And then at the end, I will leave it open for questions and discussion. So cyberbullying basically mirrors an unhealthy society. The bullying and cyberbullying have been studied often by researchers, and a lot of the focus has been on the bully in school, or you get the notion of this big bully that's harassing younger kids, but really we have a society where adults model a lot of the bullying. Adults mistreat each other all the time. And we have seen more recently examples of bullying in the political arena and online on social media. And basically what bullying and cyberbullying reflects is the deeply ingrained forms of discrimination that are so embedded in our society. And what needs to happen is that we need to unearth and unpack them and try and deal with these issues. So for example, a lot of bullying and cyberbullying is sexist, it's homophobic, it's racial, it's xenophobic. It can occur against people with disabilities or even gifted children. 14% of children who are gifted have been severely bullied just because they are so smart, and it's not appreciated by their peers sometimes. And all of this, a lot of this, these forms of discrimination are not just in and of themselves. They can be intersectional. So for example, a female of color who is wearing, for example, religious clothing or something, might actually be marginalized in three ways. One, because she's a woman. Two, because she's a woman of color or a girl of color. And three, because she is, of her religion. So different individuals can be marginalized in different ways. And some individuals and communities can be marginalized much more than others through bullying and cyberbullying. And cyberbullying is a form of offense that is carried out online on social media. Now, at one extreme, and I'm going to talk a little bit, I'm going to give you examples of cases that have occurred among teens and what exactly has happened, what happens when young people engage in cyberbullying and how they think about these things. At one extreme, there's a lack of accountability by social media platforms like Facebook and TikTok and Instagram and Twitter, as we've often read in the news. And it's enabled extreme forms of cyberbullying, such as hate, online and online social sexual violence, including sexual harassment, sex trafficking, extortion, all kinds of things that go on through social media. And this is one reason that I stopped using social media. I don't use it. I have too much knowledge and information about what takes place on it. At the other end, social media has been a platform through which activists and advocacy groups have been able to raise awareness and fueled social justice movements. So for example, #MeToo, the Black Lives Matter movement, cancel culture, all of those movements have occurred on social media. And if you think about it, millennials and Generation Z, young people, youth, are the largest consumers and have grown up immersed in social media. This is their reality. And a lot of millennials are now adults. And this is their, both their physical spaces and their online spaces are, provide their existence. This is their real experience. Now, Meta is the new name for Facebook, and it is poised to have some issues because they're talking about introducing virtual platforms, virtual spaces where avatars can socialize instead of just Facebook as we know it. What they're talking about is rooms in which people can take on a persona, a virtual persona, and move about and socialize. And to me, this is very frightening because I think it could increase the levels and types of cyberbullying and social and sexual violence and those kinds of things online in that space. So we are actually meeting with them over the next few weeks and trying to find out what exactly they're thinking in terms of what they plan to do. Thank you, Sarah. Now, before we start, I wanted to tell you that tomorrow is International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women. And since so much of cyberbullying is violence against women, I wanted to share with you a quote that I had given to our media relations just today. And it's also the Gender-Based Violence Week that addresses these issues, human rights, and a range of other areas that consider rights. So I'll let you read this. Okay, and now if we're going to share the PowerPoint if anyone wants it. So Sarah, what happened to the, oh, we're going to go to the video. So, you know, if you didn't get through all of that reading, we'll be happy to share the PowerPoint. Okay, now we'd like to show you this video that it's in French. Just hold on a minute, Sarah. We're going to show you the video, and then we will move on to some other examples of cyberbullying and research that addresses how teens engage in this form of cyberbullying. Okay, go ahead. If you don't hear sound, you will in a minute. It's just very quiet at the beginning because they're texting back and forth. Sarah, there is no sound.
Comment t'as eu ça? Oh, un de mes amis me l'a envoyé. Tu me l'envoies? Ouais, je vais tout vous l'envoyer. Oh. Hey, c'est fait.
Je veux pas croire qu'elle a fait ça. Je sais, c'est vraiment une pute. J'ai pitié d'elle. C'est Julie qui me l'a envoyé. Ah ouais? Oh, tu veux me l'envoyer? Je vais la montrer à Annie. Oui, ok. Hey, Bianca, t'as-tu vu la nouvelle photo qui circule?
Non. Si. C'est vraiment une salope.
Ouais. Tout le monde va parler d'elle dans l'école.
Regardez ce que j'ai reçu hier soir. C'est la fille, là? Oh, ouais, c'est elle. Oh, Dieu, elle est bonne. Ouais? T'es vraiment pas pire, toi? Finalement, tu viens de chez nous à soir?
Franchement.
Hey, faut pas croire que c'est pas ça si tu voulais que ta belle photo, hein? Ah, ouais, hein?
De quoi tu parles?
Hey, nous, on en a vu des affaires, hein? C'est juste une salope.
Thanks, Sarah. Yeah, so before we move on to the next slide, you can set it up. But you saw in that very short video, this was a dramatization, and it was done to reflect some of the issues that really take place among teenagers in schools and on social media. So you can see that it spills over both between social media and in the physical classrooms and in physical spaces. And this, and what it's called non-consensual distribution of intimate images. And young people engage in something called sexting, which is what this young woman did, because she was sort of encouraged to do so by a boyfriend who I guess she felt she trusted. And he sort of convinced her that he's not going to show it to anyone. And then the next day, it's all over social media and it's all over the place. So this is just one form of all the negative types of sharing of intimate images that can occur. And in the next few slides down, I will talk about some cases where young women committed suicide, young Canadian women around age 16 committed suicide because of the things that, similar things that happened to them. Now, this is a hypothetical question that we had asked, some hypothetical questions that we had asked young people ages 8 to 12 when we did our research in schools. This was in 2011. And if you consider the difference, we had asked, we said Angie was drunk and her photograph was posted online. And when asked whether she was justified in getting angry that somebody posted her photograph, her drunk photograph online without asking her permission, 98% of the respondents, 98% of the kids said, yes, she had every right to be very angry that they posted her drunken picture online, on social media. Why? Because then she would get into trouble with her parents for being drunk. But then we asked about Dana. Dana sent an intimate image to a boyfriend who promised he would not post it online. And when he posted it online without asking her, without her permission, should she have been upset? And you would expect a similar 98% saying, yeah, she should, she has every right to be upset. But 49% said, yes, she should be mad. But 51% said, no, she shouldn't be mad because it was just for fun or to make friends laugh. And some of the other questions were, there was victim blaming. So young women who, without realizing or trusting someone, will send these kinds of images without thinking they're going to be spread, are slut shamed and victim blamed. So, they're made to look as though they were asking for it. So they deserve to get the teasing and vitriol and demeaning comments that the young girl in the videotape got. Now, there have been some local examples in just around the same time in 2011. Actually, I think it was 2013, I believe. There was an incident where about 10 young boys in Laval at a middle school between the ages of 11 and 13 invited their female classmates to send them intimate images like this. And they said, oh, send it on Snapchat. Now, Snapchat is a program where the image just appears very briefly and then it disappears. And it's also owned by Facebook. And so they said, well, it'll only stay on the screen, so we won't be able to distribute it online. And but what happened is when the girls sent them the intimate images, they took snapshots of it. They took pictures with their cell phones and then distributed them online. And what happened was the police, because at the time there were no laws against doing this kind of thing, except child pornography laws, these kids were charged with, under the criminal code, with production, possession, and distribution of child pornography. So it was kind of ironical because child pornography laws are actually there to protect children. And these are kids, 11 to 13. Now, and then what happened is the police went into their homes, went to their homes at 5 a.m, confiscated all of their digital media and searched them. And so there were also claims by parents that there was a lack of due process and procedural fairness in all of this. So kids are, kids, they need to be taught. Charging them again under these laws really doesn't make a difference if they don't understand what they've done wrong. And all of these cases were settled out of court. Just go back. There were a couple of things I wanted to say. There were a couple of other cases, things that I'd like to mention there. Another case in Maple Ridge, British Columbia, a young girl was gang raped. outside of school, just outside of school. And a young boy who was 16 decided to film it. But instead of sending it to the police, he sent it to an older friend to post on Facebook. And this video went viral internationally. And but the young man who actually raped the girl, we don't know whether they were even charged. But what happened is the boy who took the videotape was charged, again with the same kinds of legal parameters, and then he was given I guess a week's jail term, and then sent home to do community service. And the community service the judge told him to do was to write an essay about the evils of the internet, which really takes the responsibility away from explaining to the children what was wrong about this. Now, okay, now you can move on, Sarah, thank you. There have also been cases at the university level of cyberbullying and involving sexual violence. When we started our current project in 2015, there were just one after the other incidents that were reported about cyberbullying and sexual violence in universities. And one of them, some of you may have read about, was the Dalhousie dentistry male students case, where about 13 dentistry male students had created a Facebook page and sexually rated female classmates, and then talked about raping them after administering chloroform. Now, these are students who were going to graduate as dentists. They were going to go into professional practice. They would be treating women. They would be treating young girls. They would be treating, or they'd be working with female staff. So this was a real problem. And the whole issue blew up. And there were arguments, discussions about the fact that, well, these boys should not be suspended so close to their graduation because they were just expressing, it was freedom of expression versus, punishing them too harshly. And the university chose to go with something called restorative justice, where the perpetrators and their victims meet each other, and the victim explains how this has impacted them and their families and their careers and their studying. And what they did end up doing was that didn't work, because the female classmates, some of them, especially the one who reported it, did not want to meet her perpetrators, or just didn't want to talk to these boys. And these boys were allowed to graduate, but in a separate classroom from the female classmates. Dalhousie commissioned a report by some very well-known established legal academics across Canada, and they made recommendations. They looked at the policies and practices and procedures at the universities and found that they were all disjointed. The policy wasn't the greatest, and Dalhousie has since revamped its policies and really improved the processes and the procedures to go from reporting all the way up to addressing the issues have been streamlined, and everybody across the university has been made aware of these. And following suit, a lot of other universities across Canada have done this. At the same time, there was another incident where a male student union leaders talked about raping their fellow female student union president by saying things like punishing her with their shaft. So, these kinds of things need to be discussed with young people about how they are impacting female students and others. So what are the legal obligations for institutions and even young people. I'll talk first about, I'll talk a little bit about the Canadian courts and what they've said. So in an educational setting, so this North Vancouver School District, this happened in a high school in British Columbia, where a young man was bullied, and he was bullied actually in the school grounds, but he was also bullied online. They would pour acid on him. They would chase him home from school. They would bully him online as soon as he turned on his computer. And they kept saying to him, oh, well, you're gay, and he wasn't gay. And so he brought an action against them under the BC Human Rights Act, saying, under the section on homophobia. And so the Court of Appeal said, well, there's no case because he's not homosexual, so he doesn't have a case against the kids. The school appealed it. So he appealed it all the way to the Supreme Court of Canada. And the Supreme Court ruled that schools must ensure a learning environment that is free of discrimination and conducive to learning. And that, of course, carries over to universities as well. The Ross versus New Brunswick School District is also one where this involved a teacher who was outside the classroom publishing anti-Semitic materials and denying the Holocaust. Now, he was suspended from his teaching job and given a desk job. And so he appealed it all the way to the Supreme Court of Canada, saying that he had a right to free expression. And this case is important in terms of even sexual harassment, both in the classroom and outside. Cyberbullying, both in the classroom, that impacts the classroom environment and online. Because what the court said is that his publications outside the classroom and outside the school poisoned the learning environment for Jewish students within the school environment. AB versus Bragg is another cyberbullying case that went to the Supreme Court of Canada. And this was a different case. It was a case of defamation where a young woman's Facebook page was taken over, hacked into, and all kinds of lewd messages and pictures were put on it. And her father, the father of the 16-year-old girl, wanted her to sue, to bring a civil action against the person who did this. But under defamation law, the plaintiff always has to disclose their name. And this young woman did not want to disclose her name because she was really afraid of being cyberbullied at school if she did disclose who she was. And so the court, what had happened is I got a call from her lawyer in Nova Scotia 2 days before they were applying for leave to appeal to the Supreme Court of Canada. And they said, we need an affidavit of the impact of bullying and cyberbullying on young people, and why she doesn't want to be why she doesn't want her name to be released. So I provided an affidavit, and on that basis, it went to the Supreme Court of Canada, agreed to hear it. And then we got UNICEF and Kids Help Phone and other organizations to intervene in the case against the press, because the media wanted to publicize this case with her name. And they were insisting that Free Press allowed them to publish her name. The Supreme Court of Canada decided that no, she was not obligated to publish her name on the basis of the evidence that we had given them. So this was kind of a win for the young woman, but they did say that the media would have access to the other facts around the case. So she didn't completely have privacy, but at least she didn't have to disclose her name. Davis versus Monroe is another US Supreme Court case that found that LaShonda Davis, who had been sexually harassed by her classmates, and the school did nothing about it. The school, and they ruled that the school had created a deliberately dangerous learning environment for the young woman. Okay, now you can go. Amanda Todd, just remind me of the time, okay, if I go too long. Oh, it's 7:30 already. I'll take another maybe 5-7 minutes, and then we can go to questions if that's okay, or yeah, let's see how we do. Because we don't have a lot of people, so I think we'll have time to answer questions. It should be okay. So high-profile Canadian cases of sexual cyberbullying. Amanda Todd, a British Columbia teen, unfortunately, this was an interesting case because her perpetrator was an online predator, an adult perpetrator from the Netherlands, and he had extorted her to strip and send him photographs, semi-nude photographs. And then he kept extorting her to do more, and she refused, and he had threatened that he would send it around to all her friends at school and put it on her Facebook page, which he did. And as a result, she was really demeaned and cyberbullied at school. And so what happened is she committed suicide. And even after she killed herself, some of the trolls on social media kept on demeaning her and saying, you know, oh, well, she should have killed herself before. She should have drunk toxic materials to kill herself. You know, she took too long. All of this horrible stuff. The issue also is that the media will show some of this trolling that's online. They kept showing her Facebook page and showing on the media in the news, showing pictures of the statements all these trolls had posted online, demeaning her. And I've often told the media not to do this because it re-victimizes, it continues to victimize the person who has been already victimized, and even after they're dead, which is terrible. Rehtaeh Parsons, another suicide, a Nova Scotia girl, was drugged, raped, and filmed and distributed online. Her parents were very active, and they worked with the Nova Scotia government and the federal government. Nova Scotia put in the Cyber Safety Act, and unfortunately, the wording in that act, because it was so hastily put forward, was struck down as unconstitutional because it went too far in terms of restricting freedom of expression. It was quite a controversial piece of legislation. Protecting Canadians from Online Crime Act came about with the Harper government. And in this legislation, Section 162 calls for a 5-year jail term for everyone who engages in non-consensual distribution of intimate images. And that includes some young kids, but at least they are not being charged, criminally charged under the criminal code anymore. This is this section that applies. The concerns about this act was, though, that it also allowed the police very broad surveillance powers, and there were worries about how far they would go in surveillance. So that was another controversial aspect of that. There are constitutional and human rights protections. Under Section 7, young people, or everybody has the right to life, liberty, and security of the person which is threatened. Under Section 2, under the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, is the freedom of expression. And the court, and under Section 15, that's the equality clause that allows people the benefit of the law, protection of the law, and protection under and the benefit of the law. So these are sections that have been challenged in cases like this, where the courts have been asked to balance free expression versus censorship, when censorship becomes necessary to regulate some of this content. And as we've seen most recently in the news, the social media sites like Facebook have been terrible in terms of seeking profits and allowing a lot of this this kind of thing to continue, even though they're saying that they have community standards and their content policies are regulating some of this, you know, a lot of this content. The problem is that they outsource their regulation to companies that don't really understand human relationships or the impacts of what happens to people. And secondly, they also use algorithms, which again, don't really pay attention to the fact that these are kids or these are people that are involved, and the devastating impact on people's, well, Sarah, this is a good segue for Sarah to take over and give you some of the stats on the impact of all of this on people.
Okay. Hi, everybody, and thank you for coming to this presentation. I will be providing some statistics on the impact of cyberbullying. Cyberbullying has gained significant attention over the last few years in research, news, media, and across educational settings. Here are some statistical data. With the highest percentage of students getting cyberbullied online goes to Instagram, with a similar and more comparable percentage with Facebook, 37%, and 31% for Snapchat. Now, a significant decrease happens with WhatsApp, with 12%, 10% on YouTube, and 9% on Twitter. Young Canadians with a past experience of victimization were significantly more likely to experience cyberbullying and cyberstalking. For instance, 31% who were physically or sexually assaulted before the age of 15 experienced cyberstalking or cyberbullying, compared with only 13% of those who did not report an experience of assault. Bullying and cyberbullying both have a significant impact on victims and perpetrators' mental well-being and physical health. Bullying can result in physical injury, social and emotional distress, self-harm, and even death. It also increases the risk of depression, anxiety, sleep difficulties, lower academic achievement, and dropping out of school. In addition to that, 64% of students claimed, 64% of those who were actually cyberbullied claimed that it affects their ability to learn and feel safe at the school setting.
Okay, so I think the next few slides, I'm going to just go really fast and skip over, because what I want to tell you is, thank you, actually, thank you so much, Sarah. We are currently working on a 7-year grant at a federal government grant that we got for 7 years in 2016. And although it's looking at universities, it does impact issues involving schools and also cyberbullying and the type of cyberbullying that we've been talking about. And we have 28 university partners, 5 community colleges across Canada and the US and UK, 5 faculties at McGill, 15 community and corporate partners, and 13 collaborators. So you can see it's a huge project. We have a lot of work going on. But what we wanted to do was look at these issues, address these issues in a different way, because even in schools, anti-bullying programs over the last 20 years that I've studied these issues have not been successful. They have not been successful because, as I said at the beginning of the talk, bullying is just considered to be another phenomenon where you've got, is looked at in terms of aggression and individual blame on perpetrators, or they've been labeled as bullies, but nobody is born a bully. We never call people the bully or the victim. These are people who perpetrate this kind of violence, who are often in research found to have been victims of this kind of violence or abuse, and who target others. So how do we educate about this if anti-bullying programs of a range of varieties have not been successful? So what we wanted to do was, we've got to unearth some of these attitudes that, as I talked about, are so deeply embedded in our communities and our cultures: sexism, homophobia, racism, intersectional forms of these, misogyny, a very androcentric society that still, I think, is fairly androcentric, and a lot of gender-based violence that occurs. How do we develop empathy, accountability, and leadership? So what we're looking at is three areas. One is how law and policy produces barriers to addressing these issues, and how they can be mobilized to affect change. And we're working with the legal justice system. We've done workshops for judges, for prosecutors, for defense counsel, because the whole system is adversarial. I won't go into that one. I think more interesting for this audience would be how Project B, how we've been using art, activism, and popular culture, looking at that. How do the arts and popular culture tacitly condone cyberbullying and sexual violence? For example, comedy, stand-up comedy is terrible at promoting sexism and misogyny and those kinds of things. So we have partnered with theater companies, with art galleries, and musicians, to provide safe spaces where people can engage in dialogue through the arts about the harm that comes to people through through these kinds of online and offline forms of violence. People are much more comfortable talking about it if they're able to analyze a painting or attend a theater production. I attended a theater production called Persephone. I can't remember the name now. It's a Greek, but I'm sure Ralph will know. A Greek myth where Hades had captured a woman and hidden her in a cave. But anyway, Ralph, if you don't know, we can talk about it later. I'll come back to this. How do the arts and popular culture tacitly condone? And so we engage, so we had an art exhibit downtown at the McClure Gallery 2 years ago, where we invited about 5 Canadian female artists. 2 of them Aboriginal, one was South Asian, one was from Mauritius, one was from Mexico. And the exhibit was interactive. We had panels and we talked about these things. We have developed a play in Vancouver around that was developed with the input of 10 theater students at a community college. And they talked about how access to such easy access online to pornography has, in their minds, really had normalized sexual violence. And that play is called Incognito Mode. And then they were supposed to come here, but then the pandemic happened. And then the third one is media and news media and social media. How does social media and news media, apologies for the typo, condone sexual violence? How does the news media, as I said with Amanda Todd, they really re-victimized the person in the way they reported the issues. So we need critical media literacy, and we need to talk about how these stories are framed, and how the news actually makes things worse sometimes, so that we can work with journalists and reporters to provide a more accurate story. You've heard about how much fake news there is, and how do we deal with that online? So we've got a number of colleagues at McGill that are working with us, and at other universities, international universities. Okay, so on to the next. But what I wanted to say, that baie-d'urfe, the city of baie-d'urfe, is onto something very good. because I know that the baie-d'urfe Junior Council has been a great initiative in baie-d'urfe. What we need to do is engage our young people, give them responsibility, engage them in addressing the issues, debating the issues, discussing the issues, bringing them to council and bringing them to parents, engaging parents, schools. It's a stakeholder responsibility. Everybody needs to have input into this. If we are really going to change society and address the issues that really, we've left a very messy world for our younger generations. And now they have grown up immersed in this, these mediums, these online mediums that might get worse with Facebook and Meta, with the virtual spaces they're talking about, with avatar spaces. It's going to be difficult to, if Facebook has been hard to regulate, Facebook and Twitter now, it's my opinion that really something like Meta might be 10 times harder to regulate. And we are actually working, I have a colleague in law who's just come from Russia, and he is an expert in international law. And we're looking at how, because social media is so international, it's an international issue, that, what kinds of international human rights law and international law might work to address this. But we also want to look at a range of other things. How do we develop confidence, empathy, community, and civil responsibility in our young people? Get them to volunteer, get them to engage in the arts, get them to engage in the kinds of initiatives that we're doing with impact. It's a long process. There's no silver bullet, but we need to provide, we need to counter this, encourage bystander participation, get young people to stand up against this kind of thing. Okay, next, I think we're, so make an impact in defining the lines between, this is my last slide, I promise you. The lines between, between online and offline spaces, the lines between where the law, where you can break the law in this kind of free expression. Where does free expression end and the need to regulate begin? What is a joke? Where does people will say, well, I was just joking, I didn't mean to harm. But where does joking actually really demean and dehumanize people? And ultimately, it's about rehumanizing people. We have dehumanized people throughout these processes. The whole notion of the whole issue of cyberbullying is basically dehumanizing people and embarrassing them and making them feel less than human. And violence has always been a terrible, and sexual violence has always been a tool. If you take it to the far extreme, it's been a tool of war through rape. So we have to be very, very diligent in trying to address these issues. Advocate for informed scholarship on diversity and gender-based equality. Work with sector partners, work with the arts, sciences, legal community. Challenge social media platforms that avoid responsibility in favor of corporate profits. Okay, thank you, Sarah. So I'd just like to acknowledge, I'm not going to read out the land acknowledgement, it's there for you to see. Thank you again to the baie-d'urfe Citizens Association. I know Nadia can no longer be on it, but I know that, but I would like to congratulate her on her newly elected position. And thank you to Suzanne, who's done a lot of work on this. I would like to acknowledge the grant that has supported our research and my research over 20 years. And I thank my team of researchers. I have a really wonderful team of about 15 researchers at McGill at Impacts. that have done wonderful work. And again, thank you to Sarah for stepping in at the last minute. So now I'll take some questions if we have time.
Yes, for sure. Yes, for sure. If people have questions for Shaheen, you are welcome to. I will remove the mute so you could ask questions to Shaheen. I will do it. Voilà. So if you would like to ask questions, it's the time to do it.
I hope I didn't overwhelm you with some of the stuff that goes on, but unfortunately, that's how it happens.
Permettre aux participants. Voilà. Is it okay?
Does everyone know? If you're shy, just you can ask questions in the chat.
Yeah, you could write it. You could.
Yeah, or you can put your hand up. I think you go through the participants and there's a hand icon, or you can put your hands up under reactions. Yes, yes, Karen. You're muted.
Attends, sorry, attends. I don't know if it's me or.
Yeah, go ahead.
Hello?
Yes, we hear you.
Yeah, okay, sorry. I just wanted to say thank you so much. It's been really, it's overwhelming and it's disturbing at the same time of what our society has become. And on one side, there's still a lot of good out there and we need to remember that. But at the same time, this is heavy stuff. And it's been very informative, I find, when I think of my grandchildren and what they face today and our responsibility to inform and to improve what we've done. So thank you so much. I really appreciated it.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. And I do hope it wasn't too depressing.
No.
You know, somebody has made a comment that this was not the case when I was young. Yes, no, I mean that when we were young, I think many of us are here are seniors. And it's really devastating and you worry about your grandchildren. But at the same time, as I said, some of these social media sites, I mean, the social media sites can be mobilized to effect positive change. And I think we don't give our young people enough credit. It's incredible how much leadership and if you engage young people and give them agency, they are very thoughtful and they, you know, really, I'm sure all of them want to see a better world. It's just that we have to break them out of these, you know, situations where they're just trying to make, you know, trying to belong, trying to fit in. And if we can emphasize to them that actually making a difference to help people, and how many people, you know, there are so many people in this world that are less fortunate than them that can use the help. And if we can engage them in working with people who need help, in volunteerism, in activism for the less, you know, for equity, those kinds of things, that would go much further, and it would go further to reduce some of these attitudes. Anyone else? Yes. Yes, Ralph.
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Okay. I really appreciate your talking to us, and it's a bit overwhelming to hear all these things because it raises all kinds of questions or observations. And as I was listening, there were so many things. I would just, to me, one of the things that the internet has done, and we've read about it a lot in the past, is the loss of privacy. That is probably one of the main mechanisms through which all this has happened, because bullying has existed for as soon as human beings have. And the problem also is human behavior. One-on-one, people behave a certain way one-on-one. When you get one-on-two, one-on-three, one-on-four, you get a totally different dynamic. Friends who have had when I'm one-on-one, behave differently sometimes. When I was a kid, when I was with a group of 3, it was easier to be bullied. So these are psychological things that get magnified because now it's not just 2-on-1. It's unbelievable how the internet has magnified. It's like gone nuclear in terms of its effect psychologically. So I don't know if there's a question there. It's just that it seems to be exacerbated so much by the internet. And there's a loss of responsibility by the parent on the parental side and on the school side. They need to, as I think, draw the lines where you were saying, drawing the line, what's acceptable, what's not acceptable. This idea of free speech, it's gone completely out of control. So every society has its own rules about that. And, you know, the one extreme is the autocracy where they decide everything that you're allowed. And we don't want that. But at the same time, we can't have total chaos. So that's not a question. It's just observing what you're talking about.
No, I agree. And I think, you know, you're making some important points because, you know, I'll draw the analogy of, you know, when you're driving, when people are behind the wheel of a car, you know, they might swear more than they would, or they might, you know, when people are behind, they feel protected, they will have less inhibition about, you know, putting someone down or calling someone names, or, you know, and the same kind of thing happens with behind the screen. When you're behind a screen, I guess people feel more protected and they lose their inhibitions. And then add to that you know, more and more people. When you've got an international, like, you know, it's infinite, because anyone can get involved. And I have, this is the very tip of the iceberg. I have studied this for 20 years and I have seen so many cases. I could rattle off for a week all of these different cases. But, you know, yes, and this is where we have to get support for people who end up at the other end of it, you know, who end up victimized, and build, you know, the numbers of people in their, you know, in support of them. This is why bystanders are so important. And it's so important for people to speak up when they hear, and nip it in the bud when they hear this kind of thing, and stand up to protect others when it happens. But yeah, it can be quite daunting. Yes, Karen.
Yes, well, thank you very much, Dr. Scherf. It was very, very interesting and very, very depressing at the same time. One question I have is, in terms of it being daunting, at the end of the day, you sometimes need law to take action. And the fact that with the internet, everything is so international, both the organizations are international, very often the perpetrators and the victims are not in the same countries. It becomes at some point close to impossible to pursue the legal action unless the international laws are there, and unless you have some kind of a reach into a different country. And that to me seems like a very, very daunting aspect. And I'm not really sure if there's even a hope for any solution for that.
Well, actually, on the positive side, the perpetrator who harassed and extorted Amanda Todd, the girl who committed suicide, he was extradited to Canada and he's in jail. So they did actually prosecute him, and so they can work. And you know, right now at McGill Law, we've got a whole team of people that are working also with us on addressing some of these issues. But yeah, there were different international laws. It's become very, very complicated. You see, what happened is when social media first started, so when Facebook and all of these platforms emerged in 2004, the courts basically ruled that social media sites were not publishers of, because they're not publishers of the content that people post, they're simply distributors, they would not be held liable. So that they were not, that they didn't need to regulate it and that they were not responsible. So those, this landmark case of Zeren, it lasted for years, for many years, almost 15 years before people started to realize that, no, this is not going to work, because the social media sites have to start becoming responsible and introducing policies. So they, regulatory policies, because things were just getting out of hand. So they did start to bring in, their content policies and their community standards policies, and because they were starting to get sued. But it really, we're trying to right now. I mean, I don't know if many of you watched the news with the whistleblower from Facebook who talked about the fact that they've just been ignoring some of this, and in the interest of profits, and they always say, oh well, it's in the interest of freedom of expression, and we are actually in discussions with some of the social media sites to see what we want to do is compare compare their content and policies and community standards with with judicial decisions and what the courts have said. But they're asking us to focus on Canada, but we're saying that makes no sense. It makes much more sense to apply international law, because otherwise, as you said, perpetrators can be from anywhere in the world. So, all of this is taking place. People are starting to look at, for example, they've got oversight boards now. They've appointed oversight boards, but it's not clear the criteria that those boards use to, to decide to have something removed. And as I said, if they're also using algorithms and outsourcing their regulatory processes, that doesn't mean anything. I mean, they're just not addressing the issues. And because they know the more people that converge on these sites, the more people that use, that post things, the more money they make. So it's really a conflict of interest, really. So we've got to find ways, legislation does not seem to be as effective, but, I think governments are looking at different types of legislation now as well.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? So I think really, thank you, Sharine. I think that the participant, summarized the feeling after your very informative presentation. Yeah, it's a little bit disturbing, and as grandparents and parents, I think it's something that we are worried, to protect our kids about that, and but perhaps we have to trust our educators and our kids themselves, that to prevent bullying. So thank you again. Now we will do the drawing. I have in front of me a box with all the names, and I will draw two names. So voilà, like you see, voilà. One is Dave Smith. Voilà. I don't know. Attends. Oh, I could. Perhaps you could send me an email after that, and I will. So I could bring it to you. So this Smith, and I take another one here, and it's Karen Ross.
Oh,
C'est ça. So both of you, if you could send me after a little email with your address, and I will be pleased to bring you the. And thank you, Shaheen.
Oh, you're welcome. I would show you a picture of the book, but it's up there on that shelf and I can't read it unless my husband wants to come and bring a copy down to show. Yes, certainly I'm happy to.
Thank you to Sarah too. I don't want
Yes.
to
Yeah, she really stepped
Thank
in
you so
very well
much.
at the last minute.
Yeah. So, but thank you. Have a nice end of the evening. Yeah, and merci beaucoup.
Thank you for inviting me, and thank you all. Very much appreciated.
Bye
And if you have any questions, please do email me or connect with me somehow. I'd be happy to give you any more information. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.